lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother. It is my view that the deceitful way the interview was obtained substantially influenced what my mother said. The interview was a major contribution to making my parents' relationship worse and has since hurt countless others.
For years, those closest to the British monarchy operated under a quiet but powerful assumption that certain relationships would survive any transition. That proximity to the crown, once established, carried its own form of permanence. That the invisible architecture of access and influence built carefully across one reign would simply carry forward into the next. That assumption is now being tested. Prince William has not yet formally ascended to the throne. King Charles III remains monarch as of this moment, but inside royal circles, a conversation has been building for months, urgent, specific, and impossible to ignore. It centers on what William has already signaled through years of public positioning and private preparation about the kind of monarchy he intends to build the moment that responsibility becomes his. And what he has signaled is not comfortable news for everyone. Camilla's family had grown familiar inside the orbit of the crown during Charles's reign. Her children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez, appeared at royal events. Extended family connections became part of the wider social fabric surrounding the palace. That visibility, that proximity, that quiet sense of belonging near the center of the institution, it accumulated over years into something that felt, from the inside, almost like certainty. William's vision for the monarchy does not appear to share that certainty. He has spoken publicly across multiple years and multiple platforms about a leaner institution, a monarchy defined by purpose rather than tradition alone, a royal structure that earns its relevance through demonstrated public value rather than inherited assumption. Those are not abstract ideas, they are a governing philosophy. And that philosophy, applied to the question of who belongs close to the crown and why, carries direct consequences for people whose position was built on the currency of the previous reign. This is the story of what those consequences could look like. Not speculation for its own sake, not rumor dressed as reporting, but a careful, evidence-based examination of what William has already said, what he has already done, and what the people watching him most closely believe is coming. Because the signals are already there, they have been there for years, and for Camilla's family, those signals are pointing in a direction that nobody inside their circle expected quite so soon. Hi viewers, here at Amelia Palace Reports, we want to hear from you. Do you think William will keep Camilla's family close, or do you believe he will quietly distance them from the palace? Drop your answer in the comments right now. The question is not whether change is coming. William has made that clear enough through his own words and choices across more than a decade of public life. The question, the one that is now generating urgent, private conversation inside royal observer circles, is how far that change will reach. Which relationships will survive the transition? Which assumptions will be quietly retired? And who will be the first to discover that the world they built around one king does not automatically transfer to the next? Because here is what most people watching from the outside do not fully appreciate. Royal transitions are not clean. They are not simple continuations of what came before with a different name at the top. They are genuine shifts in culture, priority, and power, shifts that ripple outward from the new center in ways that take months and sometimes years to fully reveal themselves. The people who built their positions under Charles built them around his specific values, his specific relationships, his specific tolerance for the kind of extended family access that quietly accumulated across his reign. William's values are not his father's values. That gap, specific, documented, visible across years of public record, is where this story begins. And it begins not with a dramatic confrontation or a public announcement. It begins as the most consequential royal shifts always do, with something far quieter, a signal, deliberate, unmistakable to those who knew how to read it. And once you see it, you cannot look away. He did not wake up on the morning his kingship became official and start making decisions. That is the part most observers will miss when the moment finally arrives. The decisions will have already been made, long before any formal announcement, long before the palace corridors fill with the particular quiet that follows a transfer of power. William has been preparing for this responsibility with a patience and precision that very few people outside his immediate circle fully appreciate. By the time the crown formally reaches him, he will not be a man learning what the job requires. He will be a man finally permitted to act on everything he already knows. That distinction changes the entire picture. It means that what observers will witness in his earliest days as king will not be improvisation. It will not be cautious early moves from a new monarch finding his footing. It will be the opening sequence of a plan that has been building for years, shaped by direct experience, refined through close observation, and held carefully in place until the moment arrived when it could finally move. King Charles's cancer diagnosis in February 2024 became the first real operational classroom. As Charles reduced his public workload following that announcement, William stepped into a larger role within the monarchy, not symbolically, practically. He engaged more directly with the internal priorities of the institution. He saw which structures served a genuine purpose and which had been running on tradition alone, kept in place not because they delivered value, but simply because they had always existed. That experience produced something important: clarity. People who observed William during that period noted a sharpening in how he discussed the monarchy's future. He spoke about public accountability, about the difference between a royal institution that demonstrated its value and one that simply assumed it. In February 2023, during a public engagement, William stated directly that the monarchy needed to reflect modern Britain, not just historically, but actively and visibly. Those were not ceremonial words, they were the outline of a governing standard. And that standard, applied systematically to the question of who belongs inside the institution and why, would not leave every existing arrangement intact. Some roles would survive the assessment easily. Others, particularly those built on personal connection rather than demonstrable contribution, would face a harder evaluation. Inside palace observer circles, people who had been tracking William's trajectory understood this. They recognized that his increasing involvement during Charles's illness was not simply a dutiful heir stepping up during a difficult family period. It was active preparation. And the people who understood that also understood something else. When William's time came, the transition would not feel like a gentle handover. It would feel like an arrival that had been planned for years. The speed of movement that royal observers anticipate from William's early days is not coincidental. It reflects a man who has already done the internal work, who has already identified the priorities, assessed the structures, and formed strong positions on what an accountable, modern monarchy should look like. The settling happened long before any formal transition. By the time the crown becomes his, William will already know exactly which questions need answering. And he will already have decided what acceptable answers look like. For those whose positions depended on the old answers remaining valid, that is not a comfortable realization. Because the old answers, the ones that justified certain relationships, certain levels of access, certain quiet privileges built during Charles's reign, were shaped by a different set of values, a different vision of what the monarchy was for and who deserved to stand closest to its center. William's vision is not the same. It has never been the same, and now, for the first time, his vision is moving from private preparation into public consequence. The plan was always visible to those paying careful attention. It was there in the causes he chose to champion, there in the deliberate distance he maintained from anything resembling excess without substance, there in the language he consistently used when discussing the future of the institution. Every choice pointed toward the same destination, and the people who built their sense of security on the assumption that the old picture would never really change are about to discover how thoroughly that destination has already been mapped. The question is not whether William has a plan. He does. The question is who is standing in its path and whether they know it yet. Now, the silence. That is always how it begins inside royal walls, before any formal change is announced, before any official statement is released, before any decision becomes public enough to generate a response. There is silence, and inside that silence, the people who understand how palaces communicate begin to hear exactly what is coming. Camilla's family had grown accustomed to a specific kind of certainty during Charles's reign. Her son, Tom Parker Bowles, attended the coronation in May 2023, seated in a position that reflected the family's recognized proximity to the crown. Her daughter, Laura Lopez, has been present at significant royal occasions across multiple years. That visibility, publicly documented, photographed, reported, represented something real, not formal titles, not official royal roles, but proximity, and in the language of royal life, proximity is its own form of currency. Under Charles, that currency was accepted without question. The relationships were stable, the access was consistent, the world as Camilla's extended family had come to know it functioned with comfortable predictability. Nobody was asking whether their presence at royal events was justified. Nobody was evaluating their contribution against an efficiency standard. Their connection to Queen Camilla was sufficient. Their history with the institution was sufficient. William's arrival as the next king changes the framework within which that sufficiency is measured. Not because of personal animosity, the record does not support that interpretation, but because William's documented vision for a leaner, more purposeful monarchy creates a structural question that personal warmth cannot fully resolve. That question is simple and it is uncomfortable. What function does extended family proximity serve in a monarchy explicitly committed to demonstrating public value? Under Charles, that question was never seriously asked. Under William, it will be. Palace observers who have studied the transition dynamics closely point to a specific pattern in how William has organized his own household. Kensington Palace, under William and Catherine's management, has operated with a notably tighter structure than Buckingham Palace under Charles. Fewer peripheral figures, more deliberate boundaries around who has access to what and why. That household culture, purposeful, boundaried, focused, is widely expected to expand outward as William assumes full royal authority. For Camilla's family, that expansion carries direct implications. The comfortable assumption that historical connection automatically translates into continued access, that being close to the right person during one reign guarantees relevance under the next, sits in direct tension with everything William has publicly represented about how he intends to govern. He is not building the institution around relationships, he's building it around function. And in an institution rebuilt around function, figures whose primary qualification is historical proximity face a genuinely uncertain future. No public confrontation is necessary to communicate that uncertainty. The signal is already being sent, quietly, precisely, in the particular language of royal life that requires no press release to be perfectly understood by those paying attention. The silence around Camilla's family is not empty. It is full of everything William has already decided. Here is the specific thing, the concrete, documented, publicly stated decision that reveals exactly where William is taking the monarchy and why it carries such direct consequences for those whose positions were built under different assumptions. William has formally and repeatedly committed to a slimmed-down monarchy. This is not speculation, it is documented public record. The concept, reducing the number of working royals, tightening the circle of those who officially represent the crown, focusing royal resources on a smaller group of people with clearly defined public roles, has been discussed and supported within William's orbit across multiple years. Following Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties in 2020, William was reported by multiple royal correspondents to view the restructuring not as a crisis, but as an opportunity to build toward exactly the kind of focused, accountable institution he had long believed the monarchy needed to become. In practical terms, that commitment means something specific. It means that the question of who is visibly associated with the crown, who appears at official engagements, who occupies space in the public and private geography of royal life, that question is being answered by a narrower, more demanding standard than it was under Charles. A standard that asks not just who someone knows, but what role their presence genuinely serves. Applied to Camilla's family, that standard produces an uncomfortable answer. Tom Parker Bowles is a respected food writer and author. Laura Lopez works in the art world. Neither holds a royal title. Neither carries out royal duties. Their connection to the institution runs entirely through their mother's marriage to King Charles. Under a monarchy committed to demonstrating purpose and public accountability, that connection, warm and historically significant as it is, does not automatically satisfy the new standard. It does not mean they are expelled from royal life entirely, but it does mean that the nature of their access, the visibility they have enjoyed, the quiet proximity to the center of the institution that characterized Charles's reign, all of that is subject to reassessment under a king whose governing philosophy was built specifically to challenge inherited assumption. That reassessment is William's first real decision as the next king, not a dramatic announcement, not a public confrontation, a standard applied consistently, beginning from day one. And the people who built their world around the previous standard are now measuring the distance between what they had and what that standard will allow them to keep. That distance is larger than any of them expected, and it is growing. She did not make headlines on William's first day of preparation. That was entirely intentional. Catherine, Princess of Wales, the future Queen Catherine, has spent more than a decade building something that almost no one in public life successfully constructs. Not fame, though she has both, something rarer and more durable than either: structural trust, the kind that does not come from a single well-received appearance or a carefully managed interview, the kind that accumulates through consistency, through showing up the same way so many times across so many different circumstances that people stop analyzing your intentions and simply accept your presence as a stabilizing fact. That trust is now one of the most significant assets in the British monarchy. Catherine's cancer diagnosis in early 2024 and the measured, dignified manner in which she eventually addressed it publicly in March of that year added a dimension to her public standing that no communications strategy could have manufactured. She became, in the eyes of millions, genuinely human, genuinely vulnerable, and her return to public duties, careful, purposeful, clearly on her own terms, reinforced exactly the qualities that had defined her public image for years: discipline, patience, quiet authority. Those qualities did not develop accidentally. Observers who have followed Catherine's trajectory from her early years as William's girlfriend through decades as Princess of Wales describe a woman who understood, with unusual clarity, the difference between visibility and influence. She pursued both deliberately, but she was careful to ensure that her influence always ran deeper than her visibility, shaping the environment around William in ways that rarely attracted direct attention but consistently produced results. Inside their household, that influence was structural. Kensington Palace under William and Catherine operated with a coherence that palace observers frequently noted: shared priorities, consistent messaging, a household culture that reflected values both of them had publicly championed: purposeful public service, meaningful engagement, clear boundaries between what the crown could deliver and what it would not attempt to be. That household culture is now becoming the culture of the monarchy, which means that William's governing philosophy, the efficiency standard, the lean structure, the expectation that proximity to the crown must be justified through contribution, did not emerge from William alone. It emerged from a partnership, a long, carefully developed, deeply coherent partnership between two people who had been preparing for this responsibility together for years. Catherine's influence on the decisions William will make as king is not incidental, it is foundational. When William commits to a slimmed-down monarchy, that commitment reflects values Catherine has embodied publicly throughout her royal life. When William applies an accountability standard to who belongs close to the institution, that standard mirrors the approach Catherine has taken to her own public role: deliberate, purposeful, never frivolous. She is not directing his decisions, she is something more significant than that. She is the living proof that the standard works, that a royal life built around genuine service and careful purpose generates more public trust, more institutional stability, and more long-term relevance than one built around access and tradition alone. Her public standing, consistently among the highest of any royal family member across multiple years of polling, is the evidence that William's philosophy produces results. For those who operated under a different philosophy, Catherine's influence is not just a personal dynamic to be observed, it is the argument that William's approach wins. And in a monarchy increasingly shaped by public confidence and institutional accountability, winning that argument is everything. Behind William stands Catherine, and behind the new monarchy stands everything they built together, quietly, deliberately, across years that most people were not fully watching. That partnership is now the most powerful force inside the British royal institution, and it is only beginning to show what it intends to build. The palace is not being torn down. That is the first thing to understand. William is not arriving as a revolutionary. He is arriving as a man with a documented, specific, long-developed vision for what the British monarchy should be, and the patience and preparation to begin building it from the very first moment his authority allows. But building something new always requires assessing what is already there, and that assessment, quiet, methodical, applying a standard that many inside the royal orbit were not expecting to face quite so directly, is already producing consequences for people who assumed continuity. The world that Camilla's family navigated so successfully under Charles was built around his specific values and his specific tolerance for extended family proximity. It was real, it was documented, it was visible in photographs and guest lists and the social geography of royal events across a decade. William's world is being built around different values, and the gap between those two worlds, between the monarchy Charles built and the monarchy William is committed to creating, is precisely where the uncertainty now lives, not in dramatic conflict, not in public confrontation, in the quiet, steady application of a new standard to arrangements that were never designed to meet it. For Camilla's family, that means navigating a transition they did not choose and did not fully anticipate.
Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopez are private individuals with their own accomplished lives outside the formal royal structure. They hold no royal titles, they carry out no royal duties. Their connection to the institution runs through their mother, and their mother's position as Queen Camilla remains secure. But the extended access, the peripheral visibility, the comfortable proximity to the center of royal life that characterized their experience under Charles, that specific experience is subject to the same reassessment that William is applying to every inherited arrangement. Some of those arrangements will survive, some will not. The distinction will be made quietly, without announcement, in the particular language of inclusion and exclusion that royal life has always used to communicate its priorities. An invitation extended or withheld, a photograph that includes or does not include, a visibility that continues or gradually, without explanation, begins to contract. That is how the palace changes shape, not with a declaration, with a pattern, emerging slowly enough that no single moment announces the shift, but clearly enough over time that everyone paying attention eventually understands what has happened. The monarchy is entering a new phase. William has said so publicly. Catherine has embodied it consistently. The household they have built together has been demonstrating its principles for years. And now those principles are moving from one household at Kensington Palace to the entire institution, applied to every relationship, every arrangement, every assumption about who belongs close to the crown and why. The question that remains, the one that will define the coming months and years of royal coverage, is not whether this transformation is happening. It is happening. The evidence is too consistent, too documented, too thoroughly aligned with everything William has publicly represented across his adult life to be dismissed as speculation. The question is how those closest to the old structure will adapt to the new one. Some will find ways to align with William's vision, demonstrating value, adjusting their relationship to the institution, finding common ground with a monarchy committed to purpose and public accountability. Others will discover that the distance between who they were under Charles and who William's monarchy needs them to be is simply too large to close. Either way, the palace they return to is not the palace they left. The crown has been redefined, not loudly, not cruelly, but completely. And the only question left is who will find stable ground inside its new shape, and who will quietly discover that the ground they were standing on was never truly theirs to keep. This story is not finished, not even close, because in our next video, we are going inside a development that royal observers are describing as the most unexpected consequence of William's transition yet. There is a specific figure, someone whose position inside the royal structure appeared completely secure as recently as 12 months ago, who is now, according to sources close to the institution, facing a situation that nobody publicly predicted. We have the details, we have the background, and we have the specific reason why this person's circumstances changed so dramatically and so quietly. It is the part of William's story that most channels have not yet reported, and you will not want to be the last to know.